Chapter 7. Oriole was flying side by side next to Obsidian. They had been flying for almost an hour.
Don't you think it would be a good idea to try our communication plan with the sea dragons during the day instead of at night, especially now that we have Hunter with us?
I do.
How do you think we should approach them?
Ask Soen and Joe.
Obsidian said.
I trust their opinions.
Oriole slowed up just enough to speak comfortably with Soen and Joe.
What is your recommended approach?
I think we should ask Hunter first.
Soen answered. Oriole slowed up again, dropping behind to speak with Hunter. As she did, Hunter turned to her.
It's a very exhilarating ride when you don't have an angry dragon trying to shake you loose.
He smiled, leaning back against the spikes that acted like a backrest.
What is your recommended approach to the sea dragons?
Oriole asked, with a deadpan expression, belying the slight tinge of amusement in her voice.
We cannot simply land in their encampment. They will flee or defend their camp with their weapons.
What kind of weapons?
Oriole interjected with a sudden alarm.
They can blast a sonic wave with pinpoint accuracy. To us, it hurts right here.
Hunter pointed to his chest.
It is an unpleasant experience, to say the least.
Can it kill you?
None of us have died from it. We find it painful, not lethal.
But they don't actually have a weapon. They generate this sound themselves.
Hunter nodded.
So what do we do?
We land before their encampment and walk to it under the cover of darkness. When we get to their camp, we watch and gather information. How many are there? How far are they from the beach? Do they sleep or are they all awake? Do they have guards or any kind of fence to thwart enemies? Do they have illumination of any kind?
Fire?
Oriole asked in amazement.
How could sea dragons evolve in water and yet create fire?
It's a good question, but one I cannot answer. Of course, being highly intelligent creatures, we have reason to believe they were first dragons and evolved into sea creatures. We don't know the reason, but legends suggest that they were dragons of the air before they were dragons of the sea.
Oriole demurred.
Still, your approach seems, well, put nicely, it seems unfriendly, even hostile.
And what do you have in mind?
Hunter asked, watching the ground below with the wide eyes of enchantment.
We can't send Obsidian in to meet with them. Obviously, we can't send you. It's Soen and Joe. They have to approach them first and make introductions. If they can't communicate with words, maybe they can use pictures or sign language, or something.
Hunter was nodding as she spoke.
Why wouldn't you go with Joe and Soen?
Oriole sighed.
I'm another kind of creature. I might confuse them. At least with Soen and Joe, they look similar.
Well, if you say so, but I think the differences are profound to those of us who prefer faces.
He smiled and then turned serious.
I would suggest that we send you and Joe or you and Soen. 2 is a good number, and the stark difference between you is a show of diversity, which is always comforting in a negotiation.
You may be right.
Oriole said.
Let me talk it over with my friends.
After some discussion among them, it was decided that Joe and Oriole would be the first contacts. They would be given 20 minutes, and if by then a signal of some kind didn't occur, Obsidian would show up and sort out any issues that may have arisen. Hunter told them where to land, well ahead of the sea dragon's camp. They had been flying very low over the land bordering the shore. When they found a landing spot and touched down, everyone aboard Obsidian dismounted quickly and shuffled to the shade of trees nearby. The problem with a dragon was there was no place to hide them. All they can do is lie down and stay still, but they are still a hulking mass of scales and wings and fire. Obsidian's head, when he stood at his full measure, could see above the treetops like a submarine's periscope. He looked for any signs of an encampment or guards as they walked in the direction of the sea dragons. It was still morning when they arrived. There had been debate about the right time to approach the sea dragons, day or night. Soen won the debate by pointing out that daylight is the very nature of illumination, which is always more about transparency than its counterpart, darkness.
I see a little structure, but only 2 sea dragons.
Obsidian reported, dropping his head beneath the treetops.
Okay, let's stop here.
Hunter commanded, holding up his right forearm.
So, Auriel, are you ready?
They both nodded as the 5 of them instinctually huddled into a circle of sorts.
Listen closely.
Hunter instructed.
When you see your first sea dragon, simply sit down. Do not look them in the eyes. Do not speak until you are spoken to. If you understand them, their language, then you can speak. If you cannot understand them, then you, Auriel, must fly away and tell us. And then we will send Obsidian to rescue you.
Hunter put his hand on Joe's shoulder. Joe recoiled at the touch but allowed it anyway.
So, will they kill me if we can't communicate?
Hunter shook his head.
I don't think so. The fact that Auriel will fly away will startle them, to be sure. But they are curious creatures, as any creature is, who can evolve by their own volition. They will consider you their guest, seeing you are harmless, but they will not initially trust you, so you must be vigilant not to make any moves that cause them to distrust you. Understood?
Joe nodded, his fear palpable. Hunter continued.
Just concentrate on compliance. If they want you to get up, you get up. If they want to walk, walk. If they try to communicate in any way, do your best to respond in kind. If Auriel returns, we will know to send in Obsidian. If that happens, you can expect them to put their attention on Obsidian. Provided they haven't secured you in some way, this is your opportunity to run away. If they have secured you, Obsidian will have no choice but to rescue you in a, more aggressive fashion.
What could possibly go wrong?
Joe lamented with a shrug.
If Auriel doesn't return, we will assume you found a way to communicate, in which case we will be waiting right here. However, if your initial meeting is more than 20 minutes without a signal, we will assume you are both detained against your will, and once again we will send in Obsidian.
What kind of signal?
Joe asked, squinting as he spoke.
Once you're in their camp, they will pay close attention to you. We will send Auriel very close to your position, somewhere in a nearby tree. You just need to shout 2 words, "I'm okay." Assuming you send that signal, we will wait here until you return.
Hunter looked around the circle of eyes.
Everyone clear?
They all nodded nervously.
I'll follow you,
Joe said, turning to Auriel, who was already hovering in the air. Auriel stayed as low as she could, barely above the treetops. Joe, in a slow jog, followed below, picking his path through the woods, careful not to step on any sticks that might snap loudly. After a short while, they both came to an opening that led to the shoreline.
Let's stop here for a second and plan our next steps.
Joe suggested.
We need to get on the beach where they can see us from a distance. That would be less aggressive to make ourselves seen.
Okay, how about you go first? Find a good spot and sit down. I'll fly in once you're settled and I'll grab their attention.
Joe nodded and immediately took off for the beach. The beach was mostly white sand with small rock outcropping and a few tide pools therein. Joe stayed low as he looked for a suitable spot to sit. He needed to be semi-visible, but not too obvious. There was a section of rock outcroppings and the open beach, where he hesitated. Once he walked out to that open space, he was putting himself out there as bait for sea dragons. In his culture, dragons were creatures of great reverence and great fear, but that was in the context of paper books, films, and imaginative myths that were interwoven with his culture as reminders of powers from above that both protected and punished. It was the punishing part that had him in its grips, and his feet would not move. After a while, Auriel flew closer and whispered loudly,
Are you okay? Do you see something?
Joe glanced back at Oriel.
Just a little worried about the welcoming committee.
Joe flashed a feigned smile. Oriel's mind could not think of anything to say. She had the ability to take flight. Joe, in comparison, was completely vulnerable. She could just smile.
Take whatever time you need.
She said, as comfortingly as she knew how.
I'll wait right here.
Joe nodded. Suddenly, he saw something to his immediate right. When he looked, there was nothing. Yet he knew something had just been there. A mirage? A chimera? He turned to Oriel.
Did you just see something next to me?
She shook her head vigorously. When Joe turned around, he saw movement again. But when he looked directly at it, it disappeared. Am I having hallucinations? He rubbed his eyes. Still nothing. Then a voice could be heard. It was soft and wistful.
What do you desire?
He looked around in all directions, even above and below him.
You cannot see me because I desire this.
The voice said, this time its tone serious.
What do you desire?
Joe debated if he should simply run away, go back to his friends, and regroup. There was something about this voice that gave him a shred of hope that the sea dragons were not killers, but he didn't know why. He decided to speak.
I want to determine if I can communicate with the sea dragons.
And for what purpose do you seek this?
Joe brushed his hand through his hair, wondering how he could express this convoluted, improbable, infinitely complex purpose. All he could imagine was if he told the truth, it would sound like a fabrication made by a child of fanciful fantasies, maybe even psychosis.
I'm unsure how to tell you,
he ventured.
I don't even know who I'm addressing.
I am an emissary of the sea dragons. My name is Alter. I am not a sea dragon myself. Rather, I ended up here in this world quite recently, and by means of which I cannot express. In my previous world, I was a servitor.
What are they? I've never heard of it.
We are quite unique in our world and apparently in yours.
Can you see me?
Joe asked, blinking his eyes and squinting as he looked around.
Yes.
And have you seen my kind before?
We are not that different apart from the fact that we have wings.
Your story is not so different from mine,
Joe admitted, glad that he could tell the truth.
I was placed on this planet without the aid of a spaceship or some other means of transportation. I simply went from my world to this world in a single instant. I still don't know whether this is a dream or an illusion or some strange reality that was induced by something.
Then we find ourselves in similar positions.
Alter said.
This is good. Perhaps we can become partners.
Can you show yourself then?
Joe asked.
Not quite yet.
Alter replied quietly and politely.
You still haven't explained your purpose in being suspicious.
Suspicious?
Joe reflected, buying precious moments to consider his response.
I might appear suspicious, but my purpose is to solve a problem.
And what is that problem?
You see, in this world, there are werewolves. Do you know what they are?
Yes, of course, at least in mythological terms.
Well, here, they're not so much mythological as physical.
You've seen them.
Yes, quite literally hundreds of them.
Are you one as well?
Alter's voice suddenly became tentative, as if she wasn't sure that she wanted to continue the conversation. Joe released a soft grunt.
No, I am human. Just human.
He paused and took a deep breath.
Look, the werewolves have asked me to negotiate on their behalf to find a way to convince the sea dragons to stay in the sea.
Why?
They fear that the sea dragons will populate their world and take it over.
Why?
Because sea dragons, if they can come out of sea, and they have wings, it is just a matter of time before they will be like real dragons, and there is nothing more fearful than a dragon. It is the alpha of all creatures great and small. That is what they fear, not so much for themselves, but for their future generations.
Why?
Well, as I said, they believe the sea dragons, as competitors of the land, will exterminate them.
Genocide?
Yes, genocide of their species from this planet.
There was a long pause, long enough to where Joe spoke.
Are you still here, Alter?
Yes, I'm still here. One moment.
The next thing Joe knew, a loud, piercing sound engulfed him. It did not seem to go to his ears, but rather, his entire body began to vibrate uncontrollably. His vision blurred. Even sounds were strangely smeared as if nothing distinct could be heard. Everything, sound and sight, were blended into one thing, and that thing was a tone or frequency that Joe wondered if it was an effort to kill him. He couldn't move. He thought he heard Oriole fly over him and ask him something in a panicked voice, but he couldn't be sure because everything he perceived was no longer coherent or distinct. It was all mixed together. His reality had been rendered utterly unintelligible. By whom, he didn't know, but he suspected it was not Alter. Sea dragons were his only guess. Yes, the dreaded sea dragons were behind this. They had found him and were planning to capture him, and now Obsidian would have no choice but to bear down on his cousins of the sea, and quite possibly his own kind, in antiquity, and fight them. And for that, Joe worried about the sea dragon's fate for the first time just before he lost consciousness.